Let's talk about bias and variability. So bias and variability, each of these can be low or high. So notice I have these 4 graphs down here, and in all 4 of these graphs there's an arrow that says population parameter. So population parameter, I'm going to say it's mu for a second, so let's just say this arrow is mu. So that's the population measurement. That's the measurement that we don't have because we didn't go ask every single person in the population. What we did is we took a sample, and so these graphs are the sampling distribution. So they're different samples all coming back with X bars, and we're graphing all these X bars just like we did in our last vodcast. And so what happens is we're trying to see if our samples are close to the population. So like for this one right here, the middle of this distribution looks like it's pretty close to that arrow. It doesn't look like it's far off at all. So we would call this low bias because the middle of this sampling distribution is close to the population mean. This is also low variability. Variability is kind of like standard deviation. Variability is how much the numbers vary. And here they're all really, really close together. So this one is a low bias, low variability. As opposed to, so let's look at this one down here at D. The middle of this graph, right here, all these X bars, looks like it's really far away from the population that's over here. We would call this high bias. But notice that all the numbers are still really close together. Low variability. So high bias because the middle is far away from the population parameter, but low variability because all those numbers are pretty close together. Okay, so let's go over here on the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side, I have this one right here. So it looks like the middle of this distribution is fairly close to that population parameter. So I would call this one low bias. But look how spread out all those values are. They're not as compact as the ones on the right-hand side. So this one's called high variability. All right, and then the last one. Well, where does the middle of this distribution look like? It looks like there's some potential outliers. Maybe this is slightly skewed. I think that the middle is going to be over here, which is not close to the population parameter. So we would call this high bias. And look how spread out they are. Well, they're pretty spread out, right? They're not as compact as the ones on the right-hand side. So this is high variability. So those are the populations. Sorry, those are the possibilities. Bias can be low or high, variability can be low or high. And since those can all be low or high, you get these 4 things that could happen. You could have low bias and low variability, which is the ideal. That means you're right on target and all the numbers are really close together. High bias, low variability, you don't want this. You're not on target. Your sample mean is not describing the population mean. Although you do have low variability, everything's close together, you probably have a characteristic in all your samples that isn't indicative of the population. This one right here is pretty good because it's low bias. The middle of it is the population, but it's high variability, everything's spread out, so it's not as ideal as this one right here. And then the last one, well, yeah, we don't want it. It's high bias. We're not on target, and it's high variability, so it's kind of the worst of both of them. And that's bias and variability.